And we returned, the Watchbox SIHH vlog. The vlog rides again. Folks, thanks for joining me for the show. All of you who followed on Instagram, big thanks. All of you who joined us on Watchbox Studios and Watchbox Reviews, likewise. Let's talk about a few highlights of the show and then we'll get into the obligatory awards roll. I'd have to say the most humorous moment of the show was when someone walked up to me, threw his hand out, and with this excited gleam in his eye said, "I know you. You're Ariel Adams." At least didn't say Ben Clymer. And then there was the X-rated moment. Ulysse Nardin wants you to think of them as a brand that explores, makes extreme statements, and yes, they even had to say they exist with an X. If you saw their press introduction, it was a little bit weird, but nothing like what followed. When a brand has to tell you we exist, things are bad. But, and I can only obliquely reference this, check out the Mamara My Love collection on UN's own site. I can't talk about it, I can't describe it in any detail, but suffice to say that if you combined Aquaman with adult entertainment, this is what you'd get. Finally, the humbling moment. My command of French, it's a work in progress. I don't spend enough time in French-speaking regions, and it's been years since I studied it on a regular basis. All of which is to say, I had a few chuckles at my own expense, and so did my hosts here in Switzerland. But I really want to reach out to everyone who watches my show in their second or third language. If you're not a native English speaker, and I've often marveled at how many people watch from regions where English is not widely spoken, and I'm always touched by the fact that they make that gesture to watch my show in English even as I speak no foreign languages fluently. So to everyone who's watching and not a native English speaker, big thanks for supporting my shows over the years. Now, let's start talking about what made this year's show special. Independence, the Carré des Horlogers, added 2 years ago as sort of a way to fit the old Palace brands from Baselworld into the SIHH structure, is easily the single and possibly sole thing to see if you are attending as a member of the general public. Ressence, Urwerk, MB&F, HYT, I could even go into other brands like Laurent Ferrier and David, who will all extend a hand and pull you into their booth to tell you everything about what they do, treating you like you are an old friend, whereas you go to the Richemont brands and it's like Cold War public relations. And by that, I definitely mean the wrong side of the wall. It's not friendly, it's not open. If you're not on a guest list, if you don't have a press pass, forget it. Rien. The bottom line is that if you want to go to SIHH and enjoy it, go to the Carré des Horlogers and camp out for 2 days. You're going to meet Philippe Dufour, you're going to meet Carrie Voutilainen, you're going to meet Felix Baumgartner of Urwerk, and possibly even Stephen Forsey. I mean, the bottom line is that these are people who are one-man brands, and they could not be more warm and open, even if you're just there to gawk. You don't have to have $1 in your hand or your pocket. You're going to get the red carpet treatment from these dudes. So let's talk a little bit about the independents. Okay, today I saw Laurent Ferrier. It was the first on my hit list. Laurent Ferrier with the new Bridge 1, effectively paying deference to the famed Only watch of 2017 that they designed in conjunction with Urwerk, but I also see it as a little bit of a reincarnation or rebirth of the Patek Philippe Pagoda, a famous mid-century, 20th century reference reincarnated as the museum watch in 1997 as the reference 5500. So if you can picture the 5500, you're off to a good start. The Laurent Ferrier Bridge 1 is that, in a more wearable 44mm lug-to-lug size, 30mm width, a new movement shaped and sized, very impressive for a company that only started making watches under that name in 2010. Laurent Ferrier doing wonderful things. They had a few variants on the other models, the Gallet, the annual calendar, Montre Echo, but the bottom line is that the Bridge 1 does justice to Laurent Ferrier's history as a Patek Philippe watchmaker and to Geneva watchmaking in general. Nice watch, wonderful to see. Can't wait to review it on this channel. Let's talk a little bit about HYT, my guilty pleasure. I'm giving them my unofficial guilty pleasure award. Why? Because the watches are big. They're extravagant, they're colorful, they're sensational, they're fatuous, and they're fabulous because of it. And here's the thing. The H0 and H20 are 48mm lug to lug, which is smaller than a Rolex on a bracelet. They're huge watches, but they have no lugs. They're like my old Snowdrop Memovox from JLC. It's lugless, so you can wear these watches, and they're starting to size down their H0 cases so that they're all 48mm, which is a wonderful gesture to people who actually want to wear their watches as opposed to just gawk at them in the safe. Now, HYT with their hydrofluidic drive system and their combination of chronode and AP Renault Papi movements are sensational things to look at. The camera, the sapphire, domed and three-dimensional, almost like almost like some sort of a biosphere on your wrist. And the mechanics, they're breathtaking, and it's no surprise that the people behind the conception of that brand had their roots in nuclear science. They're incredible things. They are beautiful to see. See them, wear them, try them on before you form an opinion. But I have to say that the H20 Renault Epopee Movement Manual Wind 8-Day Power Reserve Lugless Time is Precious variant, the H20 Time is Precious, is my guilty pleasure and the watch that I would like to wear while no one is looking. Okay, most challenged brand. I don't think I'm gonna ruffle any feathers by saying it was Girard-Perregaux. They had a new Sky to Earth 1966, nice blue dial, black case, but talk about the ultimate pander, throwing a blue dial and a dark case on an existing watch. First of all, it plays to the worst stereotypes about the Swiss watch industry being a monkey see, monkey do, copycat kind of operation. And GP is so much better. They have so much more in their hearts and in their manufacture than that. The problem is, the other watch was the Laureato Absolute, which was just GP riffing on the Royal Oak Offshore. And if you thought the Laureato collection seemed like GP's take on the Royal Oak, the Absolute collection is just an offshore, but done with less art, finery, and it doesn't even have a display case back, so they're not even proud of the size of the movement they're putting in there. Whereas AP gets the Go Big or Go Home award. GP almost cheapish about the size of the movements in their cases. I'll tell you this about the Code 1159s. Every single one of them with a big broad display case back and a movement sized and perfectly fit to the case. AP impressing with the cases on these watches. I feel like the dials are anodyne, regrettable, static, and vapid. And that's bad because they spent a tremendous amount of money on lacquer and enamel and applique gold. So what do I think is going to happen? I think next year you're going to see a crash redesign of some of these dials. It's like a car that's almost right, but some part of the design is so viciously greeted by the public and the press that instead of getting a 3 to 4 year mid-cycle refresh, the next year it comes out with a redesign. I think that's what the ultimate fate is going to be for the Code 1159s. Cases with so much charisma and sex appeal and sizzle. Heat coming off the lugs. The details that you'd expect on a Royal Oak, but with a three-dimensionality that you don't get on a Royal Oak. Almost the feeling that you're looking at the scaffolding of a skyscraper under construction. Beautiful watches outside. Beautiful watches when you look at the case back. Movements that we're going to see in the Royal Oaks, and that's a big deal because the manufacturer integrated chronograph is going to travel outside the Code 1159 line. But I think that's the Go Big or Go Home award. I give AP credit for making a huge decision, taking a risk, setting themselves up for failure, and accepting the criticism that's come. Again, like HYT, these are watches you need to see on the wrist before you judge. Most improved brand. It's going to be a dead heat between two Richemont brands, to be honest, and I don't have a whole lot of good things to say about the big groups this year. But Panerai and JLC took this one down to the finish line, down to the wire. It's going to be a photo finish. You guys tell me in the comment box below this video whether it was JLC or Panerai most improved. But I think with the submersibles, I think with the re-emphasis on men's sports watches, on watches that were in no way dainty or delicate, that were pure, unvarnished, and I hate to say this, but they were chauvinist statements in carbon and titanium, but they were no-holds-barred tributes to what Panerai used to be. There are no women's watches or unisex models here. I think the new CEO, Jean-Marc Pontrua, made a huge statement of purpose and intent, and I give him full credit. JLC. A couple of new reversos in the tribute line really helped to lift the brand, and last year felt like a desert. The presentation was awful. The booth was great, but the watches, they were lacking. The Polaris line did nothing to light my fires, and I wanted to love them. I felt like they brought nothing new to the table, and frankly, I feel like that was a lost year for JLC. Everyone on the floor seemed to agree. But this year, with the new blue enamel white gold boutique editions, the new reversos, going big with the new Gyro Tourbillon 5, a watch that frankly combines everything I love about JLC, from the craft arts to the engineering and the history. The brand is back in a big way. I don't know if they can keep up the momentum, and I don't know if it will translate to rank and file steel watches, but they're off to a flying start. JLC, especially emphasizing the new Master Ultra Thin collection in steel, doing great things to revive a brand that deserves to be top of the heap and not the back of the pack. Okay. My favorite watch? Well, if I can't make it the H20 Time is Precious, which was beautiful. A grayscale techno-industrial statement that also happens to tell time. I'm going to say the UR111C from Urwerk. Take on the 1958 Patek Philippe Cobra, designed or styled by Gilbert, engineered by Louis Cotier, and still in the museum as a prototype decades later. The UR111 is what every vintage tribute watch should be, resolutely forward-looking, but with a nod to the past. Not in style, but in spirit. So this watch has a jump hour, a scrolling and jumping minutes display, fiber optic conductance of the seconds from the center of the case to the top of the case, a unique clutchable setting system, and cases in steel, PVD or polished. It feels like an Art Deco spaceship on your wrist. It's everything I love about Urwerk, and it's everything I love about independence. That or the Assalan. And you're going to see more about the Assalan if you watch the Time Aeon Foundation Naissance d'une Montre video that's going to run on this channel. But I have to thank my new friend Serrano, who will be the designer and engineer of the next Naissance d'une Montre watch. Again, watchmaker for Urwerk right now, Serrano de Bonte, master in the making, the next F. Pigeon, the next Philippe Dufour. That's a name to know, and you're going to see a full video about him on this channel. So his Assalan watch, handmade without any CNC, right down to the hairspring he bent himself. That might be my favorite watch. That and the UR111. Urwerk takes it this year. Best sports watch. If I can't give it to the Vacheron Overseas Tourbillon, which is a micro-rotor automatic steel tourbillon with a dial that channels the soul of the chronomètre bleu from F. Pigeon, and a bracelet strap interchange system that takes the best of what Hublot's been doing the last few years. It's a wonderful hybrid of things that shouldn't come together in one package. You don't need a tourbillon sports watch, but it's so well done, I fell in love with it. That or the Moser Pioneer Diver. First, because it's Moser's first bracelet. Second, because it's their first rotating bezel. And third, because it's their first diver. Fourth, because there's no date. And I need to emphasize that the watch at 42.8 millimeters is still everyday wearable. And at $15,000, it's a legitimate contender if you're looking to buy an upscale high horology watch that is not from a big brand. A wonderful way to go, and watch that could easily be your only timepiece. The Moser Pioneer Diver. That ultimately will be my pick for best sports watch of the show. Best dress watch. It would be too easy to give it to Vacheron for the Twin Beat. Watch this space. They'll come back up later in the vlog. I'm giving it to the JLC Master Ultra Thin Perpetual Blue Enamel, and here's why. It incorporates everything I love about the company. We can't all own the Westminster Gyro Tourbillon 5. The Master Grand Tradition Gyro Tourbillon Westminster Perpetual is an amazing watch, but they're only making 18 and they cost 800 grand. So, what can you realistically expect to buy if not a $100,000 Twin Beat? Perhaps pre-owned a few years down the line. If you're me, you can consider one of these blue enamel Master Ultra Thins, and my favorite was the Perpetual. They make their own base movement. They make their own case in white gold, gray gold too, not rhodium plated. They make their own white gold rose lathe cut guilloche dial, and then they enamel that dial in-house. JLC has watchmaking, case making, they have engraving, gem setting, miniature painting, enameling, and of course guilloche rose lathe all in-house. And that's why I think this watch is a wonderful tribute to everything they do, from the craft arts to the watchmaking. Beautiful and wearable at 39 millimeters, the Master Ultra Thin Perpetual Blue Enamel. A boutique exclusive, but one that may someday find its way to my wrist. Okay, best in show. This is a tough one to call. The easy answer and the consensus is the Vacheron Twin Beat. A watch that can run for 65 days, that doesn't have an outlandish stack of mainspring barrels like the Hublot La Ferrari. Hell yeah, I'm into that. 12.3 millimeters thick, you say? 42 millimeters in diameter? A watch that costs just barely six figures and potentially well under that a few years down the line used? That's a watch that has real relevance to the high-end collector. I don't know if I see that technology translating to the mass market or even Vacheron's other lines, but no one saw this coming. It's not a variation on an existing technology. It's not a variation on an existing model line. It's not a production version of a concept from the past. For pure blue sky thinking, originality, and visceral impact, you see it and you say, yeah, that's what I love about mechanical watchmaking. And all of it in one beautiful package with the Geneva hallmark. Vacheron the Twin Beat is the best in show and the best of the year. That said, I think the biggest consequence and impact will be made by the Ressence Type 2 E-Crown. And here's why. Because it's a dignified, fitting, and sustainable combination of electronics and connected devices with traditional mechanical watchmaking. And I have to say that all things considered, this is the least offensive way to make your watch interact with your phone. A mechanical movement on the one hand, an electronic module on the other. The mechanical movement will run until kingdom come. It will be serviceable in 100 years. This watch will always function as traditional horology. But you also have a solar-charged or dynamo-charged electronic component that will communicate with your phone, sync your watch to an atomic clock, memorize 2 time zones, and adjust your watch so the mechanical movement runs precisely, continuously updating it as needed. And only 12 millimeters thick and 45 millimeters across in grade 5 tie, it wears weightless on the wrist. Check out my video with that one because that's one to see in detail, but I think that will ultimately be the most significant watch of SIHH 2019. Okay, one last thing, because it deals with the inside baseball aspect of this bizarre hobby we all enjoy, and it is bizarre. This is all about $100,000 man jewelry, which in itself is insane. In the context of a world in peril, it's simply nuts and bonkers and wonderful for it. So let's talk about the idea that we now follow the entire industry the way some fans of football follow their favorite club, the way baseball and American football fans follow their off seasons. We talk about Tim Saylor, the CMO of Audemars Piguet, defecting to Breitling with Georges Kern, Georges Kern bolting from the Richemont board nomination to run Breitling. We talk about people you'd never otherwise discuss in your daily life, like Terry Stern's relationship and personal life and how it might bear on Patek Philippe's future production. I mean, things that you would never imagine that have nothing to do with product. We start talking about watch designers like Emmanuel Guet and Gerald Genta, like they're the Picasso or Renoir of our era. We start talking about the off-season and how many watches each company is making, how many watches Cartier buys back from the Far East, which watchmaker previously at Patek Philippe is going to launch his own brand. And it's that whole notion that we now talk about watchmaking and the watch industry as though it's a sport, as though we're following off-season signings, contracts, people who break their contract and transfer, who's working with what agent, which football player's divorce is going to impact his season next year. We start talking about the watch industry as something more than a vector to a product. And I think for a lot of guys who can't buy a $10,000 watch every other week, I know a lot of clients who spend $2 million a year on watches. I can't do that. Most people can't do that. It's not sustainable. So learning about the industry, learning about watchmakers, getting into the history of a brand, the history of a watchmaker like David Condot at the beginning of his career or Philippe Dufour at the tail end of a great one. Suddenly this animates us and we follow SIHH model releases and Basel debuts as though we're talking about the big slugger who just joined our baseball team or the Galactico who just joined our football team or the coach that's going to turn the operation around. It's something that didn't exist even 15 years ago. And more than luxury watches as a mainstream hobby, more than the media that makes it possible to follow it 24 hours a day or the forums that we populate with like-minded enthusiasts, I think the fact that the watch industry itself has become a preoccupation and a pastime is a commentary on how far this crazy industry and this hobby has come. And frankly, for the guy who's not always buying the big piece, but maybe the one watch with 5 years' salary every half a decade, getting into the scene, the collectors, the personalities, the friends, the forums, the publications, and the trade shows is how we make an otherwise unsustainable hobby sustainable and fun. Guys, thank you so much for finding this bizarre and secluded corner of the internet, for following my coverage through our journey through SIHH, and videos still to come, by the way. Tim_Mosso on Instagram, and stick with Watchbox Studios. I'll be back in the saddle next Monday. Time out, Tim out, and thanks for logging on.